All right, fuel prices still on a high on most of the parts of Uganda, and not only that, meanwhile, you can definitely see that the price of diesel is actually ranging between 4,800 to 5,000 around some petrol stations. But the bigger question is, when will this come to an end? Pretty much a very cold Monday it is here in Kampala and some parts of Entebbe. I don't know whether you're catching the show from. My name is Joran Paul Sonko and welcome on board to Smart Means Business. Be the first to know the latest updates regarding business around town and also latest information from the business world, all in one morning show. Definitely here to drive your business. Among the start, if you're to look at some of the events that happened over the weekend, we can not only mention about the fuel prices that have actually been on a high and touching even those that don't own cars, but because it is a topic that you cannot leave behind, the fuel prices. And not only that, certain cement factory in the western parts of Uganda got into I would say an accident. There were accidents in the area there, if I'm to put it in that way. A number lost their lives, a number got injured, and it was a sad weekend for people that work for that factory. Not only that, a certain school with a dormitory that caught fire. So amongst all those, one of the Ugandans actually did tweet and say, imagine taking your child back to school after 2 years of them being under lockdown, and at the end of the day you hear news that your son is dead and you're only going to be picking them to bury. Oh, very sad news indeed. It can definitely be. But away from the sadness, it is a week where we are left with only days to count now for the full economic reopener on the 24th of January. I do hope some of you are ready for that. As if you look at the people in the entertainment sector, very enthusiastic and excited about the fact that they will get back to the nightlife economy to get some money over there. But away from that, let's stick our eyes to more of the business stories. This time around, we turn our eyes to climate change. When you look at climate change, the experts say climate change impacts financial institution balance sheet. Uganda's climate is naturally variable and susceptible to flood and drought events, which have had negative socio-economic impacts on the economy. For instance, Bududa landslides and the floods that has hit Kasese as River Nyamwamba burst its banks. Experts believe that these effects of climate change impact financial institution balance sheet and therefore needs serious attention from the stakeholders. Pedison Mumbere reports.
We keep moving. Let's keep moving.
Uganda is mostly a tropical climate characterized by stable rainfall patterns. However, the effects of climate change have turned the seasons around, with the country experiencing shorter or longer rains and harsher droughts, especially in the eastern, western and northeastern Uganda.
Yes.
Experts have therefore raised concern that the effects of climate change impacts financial institute balance sheet and therefore needs serious attention from stakeholders.
Climate change, I don't need to overemphasize this, is a very serious issue. Let me tackle it from the financial sector angle. You see, right now, if a drought that hits the economy, all right, and reduces growth by 2-3 percentage points takes place, I need to find out what is the impact of this on the financial institution's balance sheets. What are the risks? Am I doing a stress testing on the balance sheets of commercial banks to understand the impact of this? And what does it mean for the capitational level? So now, as Bank of Uganda, what we are trying to do, our contribution towards this is we are trying to develop a framework that integrates climate risks into the operations of the central bank and also the financial sector, with a view to strengthening resilience or climate change on the balance sheets of the financial institutions, and identifying policies that can be used to promote green financing.
Uganda is highly vulnerable to climate change. Its economy and the well-being of its people are tightly bound to climate. Human-induced climate change in the coming century has the potential to halt or reverse the country's development trajectory.
I want to ask you one on climate change. It was discussed at length this morning, but it's also another area I think we need to look at. As we grow back, how can we grow green? How can we ensure that our recovery is resilient?
The accelerating pace of climate change with global population and income growth threatens food security everywhere. Agriculture is extremely vulnerable to climate change. High temperatures reduce yields of desirable crops and affects agricultural value chain.
I would have loved to hear the entire agricultural value chain analyzed in how we can get it better, storage and primary processing, value addition, as well as marketing, because we want to make agriculture increasingly demand-driven so that we avoid some of the mistakes we've had in the past.
Climate change is likely to contribute substantially to food insecurity in the future by increasing food prices and reducing food production. Food may become more expensive as climate change mitigation efforts increase energy prices. Bedson Mumbere, Smart 24 TV.
Climate change, one of the same reasons as to why the COP26 that happened previously last year in Glasgow, that is in Scotland, looking at the effects of climate change and ways to mitigate the outcomes of this, that by 2030 there could be definitely something worked upon to see that the effects of climate change or how people or the economic activities do not affect the climate or the environment at all. So the same fact with the African continent free, the African continental free trade area, same goal is looking at how we can mitigate the effects of climate change. And for the human activities, the economic activities more so, that do happen, that greatly affect the climate and the environment, one of those key things that are being tackled in one way or the other when it comes to climate. And when you look at that, according to the key stakeholders and the experts believe that the effects of climate change impacts financial institution balance sheet and therefore needs serious attention on that way. So when you look at that, when you can actually look at the human activities such as the deforestation, looking at cultivation, there are some systems of cultivation that greatly affect the environment and in the long run will affect climate, as well as looking at some of the oils, and not only the oils and the chemicals being used by some industries in Uganda, as well as those that are being disposed of in the lakes. All those greatly affect the environment, and that means they can play a very huge impact on the climate change in Uganda. So quick ones, you can definitely agree that this is where most of us as Ugandans need to play a very huge role to clearly see that the climate does not affect us. Speaking of climate change and how human activities affect it, we turn our eyes to the real estate sector. One of the other sectors in Uganda that has steadily grown in the last decade. But not only that, some of the human activities in the real estate sector also greatly affect climate. But when you look at this, according to the experts in this sector, believe that professionalism is highly required to boost the real estate industry. While embracing professionalism in real estate stands a breakthrough point in the industry, the real estate players have been greatly urged to exercise responsibility in enhancing professionalism to attract more investors. The real estate sector in Uganda is highly informal, while real estate